Angus Young, how you doing?
Good, Becko.
The Offspring.
How's it going, Becko?
Dave Grohl, how you going, mate?
Good, man.
Pete, it's been a long time coming.
Oh, Becko, hasn't it indeed?
We go inside the dressing room, speak to the biggest names in music,
Keith Richards of the Rolling Stones.
and crack open their esky.
That's exactly how I imagine you, by the way, sitting opposite me with a vodka and orange.
You're a discerning chap. This is The Rider.
Welcome back to The Rider with Becko, and we are in the final week of Under the Southern Stars. And if you missed it over the weekend, we did the Ultimate Companion podcast with the stars of Under the Southern Stars, only on Spotify with the music included. So you can follow that right now and get the best of Under the Southern Stars. But this week on the podcast, you remember 10 years ago, Slash came out with a brand new album. And of course, this is the favourite with Ian Astbury from The Cult. Now he's back with the album for Slash with Myles Kennedy and the Conspirators. The album 4 is out now. Time to catch up with a legend of the band. And when you think about it, what a story. This guy got the phone call saying, hey, you want to be part of the band with Slash? And he was like, obviously, yes, yes, and yes. And the audition went rather well. Todd Kerns from Myles Kennedy and the Conspirators, the band with Slash.
Hi, Chris.
Todd, how are you?
I'm great. How are you?
Mate, really well. The stories coming out of this album are just incredible. I just love how you went to Nashville on a bus to get to...
Yeah, I know.
Obviously, it's a great way to get to know each other, reacquaint each other, have conversations, but I guess it puts you in the rock and roll tour bus kind of mindset before you get to Nashville. Is that what happened?
Well, pretty much. I think the idea mostly was like, let's try and make it as, bubble tight, COVID friendly as possible. It really didn't work. So that's kind of the funniest thing about it was going through this entire process was, well, let's go, get in a bus. But that way we're all together. We get there. We'll live in a house together, basically a gigantic ranch type thing. And then be in the studio. And at this house and studio house, we had food ordered in. We never went anywhere. And then day 3, Myles Kennedy gets COVID. So,
oh no!
Yeah. Well, I'm sorry. Day 5, I think he got COVID, or 6 or something like that. So we had recorded the majority of the record within 5 days. Then all of a sudden, day 6, Myles is tested positive. Although he wasn't feeling well the entire time, which makes another whole other conversation that he was actually going in there and balls out singing that stuff, thinking, "Gee, I don't feel 100%," and you're like, that's a trooper right there.
Well, you know what it is? Often we all have that feeling after a big night. We go, is it COVID or am I hungover?
Yeah, I know. Well, lately everything has been COVID. It's like, man, I don't know. It's like, I think I have COVID,
Well, you got it done, which is great. And also, this was the first album you actually recorded as live. Like, it was a bit different for you guys, not the usual, let's lay down the drums, let's do the bass and guitars and, work our way through.
Yeah, I mean, I always intend to play as live as possible in that if we're focusing on the drums, like you just pointed out, you get the drums and you start stacking everything beyond that. I'm always playing with the intention of like what I'm playing right now is keepable. Like that we can, whatever I've just played, it often doesn't get kept because, there's the nature of like, we're not using a huge amount of amplifiers because it just bleeds everywhere and all that kind of stuff. So we sort of focus on just sort of the performance of the drum kit, and then we kind of go from there. But in reality, we had done Apocalyptic Love. I did the bass, and we did bass and rhythm guitars live. So back in 2012, which is 10 friggin' years ago. And now here we are, all these years later, the idea of, well, let's just go into a room together and just track it as live as possible. In fact, there was no click track. I wasn't even wearing headphones after a while. I was just kind of like, well, at first it felt like, well, this is what you do in the studio. And then it just felt like, well, why? It basically felt like we were just in a rehearsal room together, just jamming with the amplifiers in the room, which is like, you just never do that in a recording studio. They always sort of make a point of like, no, you have to, everything has to be separated. Everything has to be sort of, pristine on its own. But Dave Cobb, to his credit, is a madman that way. So, he just decided that we're just going to do it like this. And this is how it went.
What makes that studio so special, by the way, the RCA there's a lot of history there, obviously. In Nashville these days is a real music city. It was country, but now it's just a mammoth music city.
It really is. It's a really fascinating thing. I remember the first time I went to Nashville. I really didn't know what to expect, but I remember in the hotel we were staying in, I just remember walking, up the stairs and down the hallway, and it was all music. It's like when you go to Los Angeles, you're kind of like, there's music. Obviously, we're aware of the music, or New York City, you're aware of the music, but it's so much else. Like Los Angeles with the film industry and the television industry and all that kind of stuff. New York theater, the whole other thing. But when you go to Nashville, it is music. Like it's only music. That's all they care about. It's songwriting, recording, session musicians. I mean, honestly, you'll just walk up and down Broadway in Nashville, and you'll hear like musicians who make you want to just put your guitar back in the case and push it under the bed because you just feel like, I can't compete with these people. But it really is. That building is fascinating because of, Chet Atkins and Dolly Parton and basically anybody you can think of in the Nashville world.
You'd see the records on a wall and
yeah, it's mental. Elvis Presley has recorded more singles in that building than anywhere else. So you're like, oh my God, sort of blows your mind. But at the same time, I'm not the kind of person that gets, sort of like freaked out by that. I think actually quite the opposite. I'm sort of more inspired and kind of feel like I get a real kick out of that myself.
Yeah, well, of course you would. Yeah. And so when you got invited into the band, were you on the original debut album or did you tour that in 2010? Because I knew you joined around 2010. I wasn't sure whether you're on that original album or not.
No, I was never on the first solo album. The first solo album was session guys, Chris Chaney from Jane's Addiction, Josh Freese on drums, Duff McKagan and Dave Grohl played on some songs, stuff like that. And then all those singers. So in reality, it was a record Slash had made sort of, with no intention of having a band necessarily. So, but when he decided to promote that record, he had to put a group of guys together. So, bringing in Brent Fitz, and then I sort of came in on Brent's coattails and went from there. So from 2010, March of 2010, basically 10 years ago today, or I'm sorry, 12 years ago today, or around now, it's sort of like we started kind of jamming together, and then we did a live album in 2011, and then Apocalyptic Love was the next record. So everything from then, I've been around.
And you were doing the vocals on a couple of those songs as well when you were touring. So was it the Iggy one and the Lemmy one, I think, from memory?
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
And backing vocals on this current one as well. So you got some important roles on top of being the bass player.
Yeah, I wasn't brought in as a vocalist. I've always been a vocalist, but I was brought in as the bass player. And in reality, the intention of doing, I just you get hired for a gig or whatever, and you do that gig, and it turns out I could sing all that harmony, or I could sing that harmony, or I could sing that harmony. And Myles and I, both being vocalists, he became sort of very, aware that like, well, why don't you sing this and why don't you sing that? And he sort of like dictated, not dictated, but sort of like, why do you sing this part and why do you sing that part? And then when the idea came up to trying the Lemmy songs, and Myles was like, I don't sound like that. Or the E-pop songs or any of that kind of stuff. They just sort of said, well, why don't you sing these? And I think Myles in reality appreciates the a little bit of a breather now and again. So yeah, it's been very interesting having that role for sure.
But as a kid who grew up with Appetite and Use the Illusions 1 and 2, etc., even the Spaghetti Incident, by the way, which I kind of enjoyed. What was it like getting that phone call saying, "Hey, we want you to audition for Slash's band"? I mean, you must have just gone nuts.
Well, the funny thing about it was never put to me as an audition.
Right.
Fitz knows me well enough to know that I'm always up to jam. And, living in Las Vegas, I was playing in a band, and we would have anybody who would come through town, you'd be like, come down and jam. And we'd like, I had the opportunity to play with a lot of childhood heroes of mine, and it became sort of normal in a way, and then I just got the phone call, do you want to come down and jam? I was like, yeah, of course. It was never put to me as like, the bass player's not working out, that kind of thing. It was sort of like, yeah, of course, I'll come jam. I didn't listen to anything. I was like, I just know Appetite from top to bottom, and some of the Use Your Illusions, being a lot more vast. It was sort of a different thing, but
yeah.
just went down and we just jammed, and that was that. Next thing I know, it's like happening.
So what was the song you went with?
Night Train.
Nice.
At least in my memory, it was the first. In fact, I feel like it was the only song we kind of jammed. We jammed that and maybe a couple others, and it was just sort of like, yeah, cool, and then the next thing I knew, like I said, it was like, we're doing Jay Leno next week, or like the Tonight Show or whatever, and you're like, what? It's like the whole thing was very surreal. So it wasn't really enough time for me for my mind to be blown by the moment, because it was just so surreal. You know what I mean? It was just so strange. And it was, it was a while before it sort of really kind of kicked in that, that's the guy. And there was always something kind of, Fitz and I have actually talked about it, how like your expectations of what Slash was so much different than who he really was in a sense. He wasn't smoking, which was a big thing. Like, he wasn't that guy you had known your whole life.
Yeah.
He was this sort of new, healthy version of himself. And it sort of was kind of like, what's about this guy? What is it about this guy? It's something so sort of different about him.
Hey, be careful. You might be killing his image here right now. he could be on the phone going, don't tell him about the health thing.
Yeah, he just sort of, he was just this sort of like, I mean, the one thing I'll say for Slash is he has this the strength of 10 men that way. Like, he's just, a lot of people would be like, in his position, would be like, just buy a chunk of land and ride it out somewhere and pet the dog, but not him. He's just going to do this till the day he falls down.
Well, when you think about all those guys he's played with, it's amazing they all lived through, the decade. Duff, who really came close to killing himself so many times with the amount of alcohol and drugs and everything, and Slash did his fair share, and even Matt Sorum told stories about how it was like Scarface backstage at half their gigs. So no wonder Slash has gone down this path, because he's got to survive.
Well, there's a longevity game to it. You know what I mean? Like, I've always said, the fact that all 5 original Guns N' Roses members are still alive, and all 4 Motley Crue members are still alive. All of those people, it's, their stories are just kind of like, at any given point, one of them could have, slipped up and not been here anymore. But, I think the Slash, when you've lived a life like that, where you've been there, done that, it just becomes kind of, what is there left to do? Eventually you just sort of like, and I think for him, it's sort of like, at the end of the day, I think he realized that music was really the most important thing anyway, and I think that, those guys have had health scares, when it comes to like what they've done to themselves, that were sort of like, well, if you keep doing this, that's going to be, it's not going to end well. So I think there's no bigger sort of line in the sand than that. So thank God Duff and Slash are in better shape than they ever have been. So there's that. It's
insane. I mean, actually, have you had many sort of conversations with Duff over the last
many. Yeah.
Did he give you any advice?
Well, he's an amazing man in so many ways. I mean, he's done so well for himself, even beyond just music. Luckily he had the platform of being in a mega successful band that sort of created the money for him to be able to invest into the next chapter of his life. But, I think he's such a health nut. And I am not, I've just been very fortunate that I'm kind of like this, I just never got entranced by all the things that caught those guys. But those, he's just, Duff is just an animal as far as like, he's always got to be doing something. He's on a bike, or he's running, or he's, I'm like, dude, stay home and pet the dog.
And look, this, that first Guns N' Roses tour, 3 or 4 years ago, I guess, that was something we never saw coming. Did you ever see that coming? I mean, all the conversations you had with Slash, and finally it was like, oh, we're actually going to give it a go.
I wouldn't say I saw it coming. In a lot of ways, I think that we were so focused on what we were doing, it was not really, not something that it was just kind of in mind. I kind of always felt like there was certainly a possibility, because no matter how much, no, never, you really do feel like there's always, like I say, it's like, I never feel like bands break up, even with all the musicians I play with in my life. I feel like there's always an opportunity that presents itself to find yourself back on stage or in a studio with somebody you played music with, So when I never really believe in that door just gets closed, I think that it's sort of like, no matter what Slash did in his life, he was always going to be associated with Guns N' Roses, whether that presented itself again or not. But I think, for the right reasons. And when it was sort of brought up to me, I was like, well, you kind of have to do that, really. It's like, it's your legacy. It's kind of like you got to go at the top of the mountain and put your Slash flag on it and go like, this is who I am. And as a fan, it was just like, well, I have to see that, I have to witness this. So I think it's an important thing. Like I say, I didn't see it coming, but at the same time, I wasn't surprised when it did.
And it was happening sort of all around the same time of you guys putting out music.
I'm more surprised that we're still doing this. In a lot of ways.
Well, he's a busy bloke. I can't believe he's able to juggle, two bands, recording as well, and
films. He produces films,
a girlfriend.
Yeah, the whole thing. Yeah.
So you're from Vegas these days.
Yes.
What's the Vegas music scene like now? Because a lot of musicians sort of tend to be gravitating towards that area now.
I find that all my Los Angeles friends are finding their way to Vegas or Nashville, depending on what you're up for. The good thing about Vegas for us, and I've always believed it to be a distant suburb of Los Angeles. It's like a 4-hour drive, 3-4 hour drive, but nonetheless, I'm close enough that anything I have to do in Los Angeles, I can do. I've always loved Vegas in that it is another city built entirely on entertainment. So music and if you can juggle or you're a magician or whatever the hell you have, you can hypnotize people. It's like whatever it is, you'll find some kind of gig there. So there's a kind of like, like circus folk or something. Like there's a whole thing out there where it's like you find yourself kind of like, like I literally am friends with magicians and hypnotists and all kinds of nonsense. You're like, I never would have thought I would know these kind of people, but that's Vegas. And the cool thing about Vegas, when I walk into a casino, I think to myself, how many gigs are in this room, in this building? Because it's a casino, and there's a lounge over there and a club there and a showroom over there, and every one has either a duo or a full band or a solo guy over here. And I think to myself, that's what I love about it, is that you can come to Vegas and with a little ambition and some talent, and you can pay the bills and put a roof over your head with a guitar in your hands or something like that. That's basically why I'm there. I always kind of figure, well, when it all falls apart, I'll just be singing, Sweet Home Alabama in some showroom in the corner there.
Hey, look, hopefully it doesn't come to that, but you're right. I mean, Vegas is a great place for that. And
there's worse ways to end up.
Exactly.
Worse places to end up.
That's right. I mean, do you go to the casinos much? Because I always thought locals in Vegas don't actually go to the Strip very often, but maybe as a musician, you probably do go a bit more.
Not to the Strip that often. There are actual local casinos out in the different corners of the town as well. But you would be surprised, because a lot of, shows that come through town or restaurants and all that kind of stuff, they're all located in casinos and whatnot as well. Shopping, things like that. So not a lot, but we do end up going to the Strip on occasion. And like I say, there's so much else in the casinos. It's not just gambling or gaming, as they call it in the
the correct definition. Yeah. This opens up so many doors to you, being in Slash's band, and you meet so many people. Is there anyone else now you want to kind of work with? You've developed a friendship with, and you thought, you know what, I'd love to give that a go.
There's a lot of people, honestly. I'm such a fan of music, I really am I just, I love music so much. It's like, I always kind of felt like if they were teaching music history in school, I think it would have been, it would be a very specific chunk of music history, because I was always very good at this guy produced that and that guy's the guitar player for this. I was never very good at school, but I could sure retain the things that I love. Obviously there's the guys like the Paul McCartneys and the Keith Richards and those kind of people that I would love to know and to work with. There's other people like Steve Stevens from Billy Idol is a friend and an associate, a colleague. but we've never ever done anything together. I would love to. I would love to do something with him. I think he's like one of my favorite all time guitar players and heroes. It's a long list, frankly. Like Ginger Wildheart from the Wildhearts, and I've been lucky enough to play with Michael Monroe from Hanoi Rocks, and all these people that I grew up loving. Iggy Pop, I've never had a chance to meet, even though I've been singing his song with Slash for a long time and all that kind of stuff. So I just love music so much that I'm always in heaven about it.
Steve Stevens, you're right. I mean, brilliant guitarist, but certainly imagine having Iggy Pop on your resume.
Yeah,
you got to get his shirt off though on his last tour. Actually, he's got a very
exactly. Yeah.
He's got a great band though. But
he does, yeah.
That'd be insane. The album number 4. Have you got a favorite song on that where you straight away go, okay, that's the one we really gel live?
Well, actually, we're playing 6 out of the 10 live already, which is kind of unusual for a band when they put out a new album.
It is.
It's very unusual, but not unusual for us, because we will eventually play every single song. Every single song that this band has recorded as a band has been played live. It's just the way we do it. April Fool is a favorite of mine. We haven't played it live yet, which is interesting. At least in front of people. We've played it, in other things. But so I'm really excited to play that one. Fall Back to Earth, we haven't played live yet. It's also one of my favorites. So we've been slowly adding them. Like we just added Spirit Love the other night, which is a really fun song. It's actually quite challenging because I do a lot of singing in that one and playing. And a lot of the time I'm doing this sort of like, where they're not necessarily in syncopation with each other, where I have to kind of split my brain into, okay, this is the singing and this is the bass, but I always love that kind of challenge. I actually really enjoy that stuff.
Well, I like the idea of Duff having a sick day and you getting the call up, because there's something about some of these guys who are in covers bands. You hear these movie scripts and you're going, you know what, the guy from the cover band getting the job in the main band. It happened to, in a way, Chris Slade from AC/DC. Like he was off playing covers of AC/DC for like a decade. Right. Then got a phone call saying, "Oh, Phil Rudd, there's a bit of an issue. Can you come and play?" Yeah. Like, isn't that just insane? As a kid, though, to grow up with all these bands, have the opportunity to play with them, or even just to meet them and talk about music is just so special, and I'm so jealous.
Yeah, to me, it's like I say, it's like I'm such a fan of music, and Alice Cooper is close to our camp, and it's just one of those things where I just find it surreal, where we're like, wow, man, like that's a legend, really. It's like to sit there and listen to him just tell you what he had for breakfast, or whatever. It's very surreal. You're like, okay, wow, it's it. It's there's always someone else to meet. As long as there's a Beatle alive, as long as there's still a Beatle alive, you have to kind of think that there's
always hope.
Something to do with it. Yeah.
Finally, the podcast is called The Rider, which you'd be well used to. So the one thing I do want to ask everyone is, what is in your rider? What do you demand? Is it getting more extravagant?
It's pretty. You'd be really disappointed, frankly. It's actually mostly health nonsense. I am, the strangest thing about me is I'm not a big party drinker kind of guy, but I always have had a great deal of love for red wine. I'm not a mass drinker, but I love it, and I generally have one bottle of wine on every rider and go home with a wine cellar's worth of wine. Essentially, much to my wife's chagrin, it's kind of like, we gotta make a second wine cellar. It's like, so that's been an ongoing project of mine for years. But mostly it's very standard fare. I keep telling myself it's like, ooh, this trail mix is really healthy, and it's always the trail mix that has like like chocolate in it or whatever. It just essentially just ruins the entire idea of this healthy thing that I'm eating. So. Yeah.
Wine does impress me, though. So what you got to do now is, when you have leftovers at each gig, you need a road case which allows you to pack a bottle of wine per gig. And by the end of the tour, you've probably got, about a couple of dozen or something at least, or longer.
That's kind of the idea, which I stole from Geddy and Alex and Neil from Rush. I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah, right.
They started their, wine collection wine cellars. I mean, they're probably getting infinitely better wine than I get, but even my friends, a band called the Tea Party from Canada, who come down to Australia all the time.
Yeah,
those guys were huge on it. They'd go down there and they'd come back with crates of Rosemont Estates wine, and I'd be like, man, these guys are so much cooler than me. I never thought to do that. Now I'm like, oh, to hell with it. I'm going to try and take advantage of the entire experience. It's fun too, because it's like you come back with stuff from, different corners of the world that you wouldn't normally have.
Chile, you get pisco. You go to Australia, you bring back a bottle of red wine. If you go to America, obviously, for us, it'd be bring back a bottle of bourbon. I think it's a great idea, actually.
I'm not as creative as you've just been. I'm like, wow, I usually leave it up to the promoter to give me whatever they're going to give me.
Go for gold, as far as I'm concerned. So good to meet you and chat about rock and roll, and best of luck for some tours, which I'm sure are going to be announced very, very soon. And we can't wait to see you down here. It'll happen. You might already know. Maybe it's already on the cards. But congrats on the fourth album too.
We can't wait. Best coffee in the world is in Australia. I don't know if you guys know that or not, but it's the truth.
There's a lot of Aussies moving to LA and opening up coffee shops for that reason. Yeah.
And we're hip to them too. There's a few that we're like, we've been chasing down because they're specifically Australian. Yeah.
Isn't it funny? Who would have thought? Well, look, mate, take care and stay safe. And I will talk to you soon. Thanks for being on The Rider.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Take care.
What a great bloke. There he is, the bass player of Slash's band, Myles Kennedy and the Conspirators. And the album is out now. 4. Go and check it out. If you missed our special for Under the Southern Stars, the Spotify exclusive with the music included, you can check out that right now as well on Spotify. Next week on the podcast, I reckon it could be the biggest one so far. The lead man of the band, Incubus. He is back with a brand new solo album. Next week, one-on-one with Brandon Boyd. I'll catch you then. This is The Rider with Becko.